You're listening to the Art of Making Home podcast with Sandro Stefanucci, a home builder with over 37 years of experience in the industry. This series shows you the construction industry from the contractor's perspective, as well as what it's like to work with the many different types of industry experts, such as interior designers, architects, and subtrades. In addition, we'll be discussing challenges that we have encountered and what other industry professionals can learn from those stories. We'll be covering such topics that many people do not consider before building a home, like what can your property actually allow? Is your property located on a steep hill? Where is the location? What will the municipality enable you to construct? It might not be as cut and dry as you think, so let's get the conversation started.
Hello, beautiful people. It's Sandro Stefanucci, and welcome to my first podcast. I've been in the building industry for 37 years. I'm a hands-on type builder. I've learned from scratch pretty much everything from the beginning stages. So basically hands-on type learning for me when we first began the process. And I just found that I really loved building and renovating homes, and I decided to make a career out of it. I want to do a podcast because there's a lot of, I think, misinformation in some respects. People said, oh, I got this guy to do this, or my neighbor got this done. It was like this. And there's always this preconception of how things should be done in construction when they really don't have like a real good solid idea of it. So if I could share my experiences with other professionals, other people maybe looking at building or renovating, it would help them, I think, maybe get a better understanding of the process necessary to build or renovate. What is today's topic? Oh, construction permit. Do I need one? And why do I need a construction permit? So yeah, that's the topic today. So I guess first of all, what are some of the jobs that would need a permit? You get a ton of people that are always saying, oh, well, I don't need a permit. I'm just going to move this wall and that kind of thing. And that's not usually the case. So when moving a wall, regardless if it's a bearing wall or non-bearing wall, you still would need a permit for that. Where you don't necessarily need a permit, and people, again, not necessarily sure on what they should be, if they should be getting a permit or not, or they don't care, I don't know. But if you are replacing your kitchen cabinets and you're just basically changing what's there and upgrading it, you don't need a permit for that. If you start adding more appliances to that, or more like electrical load or more plumbing load, like you're putting another sink in, maybe 2 dishwashers and stuff like that, you'll need a permit for that, because now you're adding to a system that may or may not be able to handle that. So you have to get a permit for that and make sure that's done correctly. If you're moving locations and you're actually adding plumbing thing, or you're adding more electrical load, you'll need a permit for that. You don't necessarily need a building permit, but you would need a plumbing permit or electrical permit depending on what you're doing in that respect. So your contractor will be able to help you through that process much easier. And then obviously if you're doing an addition, you're going to need a permit regardless of that. If you're building a home, like some guys don't think about, oh, I need a permit to cut the tree down. I need a permit to demo. Even if you're doing a renovation, you're doing an extensive renovation, you still need a permit to be able to take that stuff out. Like if there's asbestos or you're demoing, you're still going to need a permit to get that done too, which is all within that building permit process. So those are just some of the permits that you need. This is what you need to do if you're doing a condo renovation. You know, it's pretty much the same thing other than the fact that you're dealing with strata with a condo. So if say you're just going to change the cabinets again and you just want to update your cabinets and stuff, you don't need a permit for that, but you definitely need to tell your strata that, because they're going to want, okay, well, who's doing it? Do they have liability? Because what happens if he ends up cutting water line or something like that and it starts leaking, the issues liability wise. So that you have to go through the proper process, and typically it's dealing with strata on that. And if you want to renovate your home, the process again is very similar. What is it you're doing? And then from there, you have to really talk to a professional that can guide you in what you need for permits for that kind of thing. So it's not, just go ahead and start doing something. You have to talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about, familiar with the area that you're working in, and tell them what you want to do. And they should be able to tell you whether you need a permit or not. There's one particular job we did not that long ago, just fresh in my mind. We did a renovation and we removed an interior wall. Of course, we needed to get a building permit for that. So we went through the process of that. Meanwhile, and I didn't know, but on the outside of the house, there was a metal awning that was installed on the house. I think it was almost like 15 years ago. And there was an outbuilding. It was just an accessory building, like they put their lawnmowers and that kind of thing on it. But it was built also 20 years ago. So the city will typically look on Google Maps and they'll look at this stuff. Oh, is there anything here that looks like it's not been permitted? Oh, that awning, they go back their system. Oh, there's never a permit for that. Okay, well, you got to do something about that. Oh, there's nothing for that shed. You need a building permit for that shed too. So it took us a long time. I didn't know at the time we did it, but in order to get the building permit that I needed for the interior of the home, that wall that we're moving, we needed to include that and deal with it. So I needed to get a structural engineer on both of them, two separate ones, to pass it to see what was there was acceptable, and if not, what do we need to do to upgrade it. So it did cost them a bit of money to do that. We had to do some reinforcing on the awning. We had to rewire the electrical for the shed. So we did get that through, but if I couldn't find a structural engineer to be able to sign off on that, luckily I know a guy really well that does that, and we went through it. He was reluctant to give me the go-ahead and sign off on it because it's his liability. So a lot of times you won't be able to get anybody to sign off on it. It's only because I have a good working relationship with my engineer. I knew that the building wouldn't fall down and that kind of thing. So if you get into doing something like that and you don't get a permit, and later on down the road, those are the issues. Basically, you're just taking it all apart. So thousands of dollars could be gone if you don't do it with a building permit. It would have been a whole lot easier for them just to take a building permit out before. People ask me, why do you need a building permit? The main concern is safety. That's number one on any building. And that's why we have the, seismic requirements for earthquakes and stuff like that, sprinkler systems, been electrical fires, places falling down. I mean, there's been decks, they get, like a whole bunch of people on it, the deck falls down. It was, wasn't done properly with an engineer. Somebody just decided to build a deck, and that's happened before. So they're really looking at having a liability, somebody to take liability off of the city, more or less, because that's what they're doing. They're shifting the liability, but it also ensures that you have a professional designing something like a deck, if you're doing a deck or your home, so that it doesn't fall apart. And then if something does happen for whatever reason and you have an issue, they have somebody to go back on. See, this engineer designed it this way, it failed, and there's somebody responsible for that. So it's really taking responsibility for what you're building, and by using the professionals to do that, where they're able to sign off on it. So now you've got responsibility. So that's what you want. Because if you build something and then you have all your buddies over and say like a deck, and it all of a sudden falls down and somebody ends up dying from it, who's going to be liable for that? You are. And that could be a real problem. There are people that do work without a permit, and this is what I've seen. And this was not that long ago. It was actually for a client of mine that I said I wouldn't do it without a permit. And this particular person went and did this work because you needed a permit to do this work. And then halfway through it, I guess a neighbor or somebody started asking some questions, I guess, and decided to phone the city to see if this person had a permit for what they were doing. And she didn't. She didn't want to go through the permit process and all the rest of that stuff. So, they flagged her and they stopped, they shut you down. Now you have to have an architect draw everything out, and you have to get somebody involved in it, which can be a challenge, for an architect to step into a project already. So, and it's going to cost you a whole lot more money. It would have been better off for her to actually get it done, do it right the first time. It would have been less expensive. Now it costing her money and time with this thing. And it was actually a dormer that they were putting on the upper floor of the house. So now they have to basically tarp it and wait for the permit process to happen. So that took months by the time she actually got the permit to do it. So it can be very inconvenient. People ask about, permit processes, and every city is a little bit different timeline wise. So like, Vancouver, you could be 8 to 12 months for a permit, depending on what type of permit you need to get. Burnaby, you might be 3 months, 4 months, somewhere in there. So you really need, I guess, somebody that's familiar with those areas to give you a good idea, how long it'll take you to get what it is that you're applying for. Is it an outright permit, which people don't realize is a development permit and outright permit. So there's relaxations that you can ask for on your permit. Like, we push the smaller lots in Vancouver to go for a 3-foot setback on your side yards. And when you do that, that's like a development type permit. So it takes longer to get the permit, but it also gains that extra bit of much needed few inches that you have on each side of your house by being able to do that. There have been people that have come to me after the fact. This one house in particular that I know, he pulled out the homeowner builder, licensed himself, and he was able to build a house himself. Now, this home was extremely complicated. Even for a good seasoned builder, it would have been difficult. And in the process, he was having issues and he couldn't get anything done and couldn't get it done properly. I think he went through a couple other contractors that were not that experienced as well. So I finally got a hold of this one here, and to help him out, I had to resubmit permits in there because our company took it over. And then from there, I was able to, to start, fixing this guy's house and putting it back together again. So that's, something, I know there's probably a lot of people out there, maybe this might be a little bit off topic, but there are a lot of people looking, I can build a house myself. Today, the houses are getting so complicated that we do, courses, at least probably once a month anyways. We're doing courses on upgrading. Different systems are coming out for houses, so they're so complicated. I just don't know that somebody doing one or pulling out a permit, homeowner builder permit out, is actually a wise decision because they're so complicated. You can run into so many problems and it's going to end up costing you more at the end of the day. And 10 out of 10 guys, that's what happens. There's a lot of misconceptions about permit, but the main thing is they just don't want to deal with City Hall. And they think, oh, it's going to take forever to get a permit. And it could be that, I think it's just, oh, it's going to cost me a lot of money to get a permit. Well, I mean, yes and no, it does. But if you don't get a permit and you do the work, and say you go to sell a house in a few years, and all that unpermitted work that you did, and say the person wants to get a permit and he's going to do something to that house, and they're finding out that all this stuff, and then you didn't tell them that you had all this unpermitted work, they'll be coming after you for all the damages on that. And that's happened before. And I know that from fact. I had building inspectors that have told me where they have to get involved with something like that on actually law and go to court, all that. And people typically win because they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing without a permit. And just don't. It's just not worth it. Thanks everyone for listening to my first episode. On our next episode, we're going to talking about land limitations. And that's going to be a great one to listen. We have just a little bit of teaser for you. Is this one project that has a ton of excavation work and really high concrete walls that the owner wasn't accounting for. More about that on our next episode. Thanks again, guys. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Art of Making Home with Sandro Stefanucci from Abstract Homes. Make sure you keep following every episode to learn his advice about the building industry here in the Lower Mainland. He will have great tips on following episodes when it comes to building or renovating your home. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and of course, Apple Podcasts, so you don't miss his latest construction advice. If you want more information on Abstract Homes, all you have to do is go to their website, abstracthomes.com. Talk to you next time.